My name is Dyne. I came to South Africa from England in 1981 on a 3-year contract, and I'm still here. And I have my own business after being retrenched by my British parent company some almost 30 years ago. We are in engineering spares, and thanks to the good Lord and many good customers and friends, we are still in business. I've always loved aeroplanes since I was a boy, and my love really came when my dad took me to see a film called Reach for the Sky in 1955, which was the story of a British fighter pilot, sorry, I'm getting emotional, who had a bad accident back in 1934 or 5, lost both his legs, and they fitted him with tin legs, and he then rejoined he wouldn't have been able to fly again had the war not broken up, but the Royal Air Force, the British Royal Air Force, was desperate for pilots, so he re-enlisted and he went on to fly. And this film, Reach for the Sky, starred a great, very famous British actor called Kenneth More, and in real life, Douglas Bader, the pilot, was shot down, and he managed to get out of his plane, although his right leg was trapped under the rudder, which controls the direction of the plane. So he left his leg behind. He unstrapped it and left it behind, and then landed and was captured by the Germans and taken prisoner. It's a wonderful film. He tried to escape a dozen times but failed, and was finally sent to Stalag Luft 3, which is a very famous German prisoner of war camp, which was meant to be impregnable, but in fact he managed to escape from there a dozen times until the war finally came to an end and he was sent back to England. It's an inspirational story which is hard to tell without some emotion, sorry. But I feel very strongly about the bravery these young men showed in the Second World War. And he lived, he became a private, he still had now 2 legs, he took up golf and played to a single handicapped figure. He was a pilot for the Shell Petroleum Company and worked for them for many years until he died, I think in 1980 something, when he was by then 65 or something. But an inspirational character, Bianca, and a hero of mine through and through. And in my man cave, in the bedroom, I have a number of paintings signed by him. I think that one there is also signed by him as well. Douglas Bader, a lovely guy and a great pilot, and a very, very brave guy. I've always, I've been flying for a long time, and I've known there are 3 not in this area, there are 2 in this area. This one was on a factory in Heidelberg. There's one more on a pole in Nigel, and the 3rd one is on a game farm in the northern Transvaal somewhere. So I've always been after one, because I thought it would make a great project for restoration, and it's a beautiful machine. French built, as they all were, made by Dassault, D-A-S-S-A-U-L-T. And what happened was, during the border war back in the 80s, the South African Air Force didn't have enough Mirages. And we were being flown over at that time, Bianca, by the Russians and the Americans and the British, who were literally counting how many Mirages we had, so they could feed that information to the Angolans, and they would know how strong or weak we were. And we were very, very weak. So they built these, which are fiberglass and some steel works for the undercarriage, at Dyne, as it was in those days, or Atlas Aircraft Corporation it was. And they were moved at night from location to location, from Swartkops to Waterkloof to Ondangwa and all over the place, where anybody flying overhead would think, gee, South Africa have got quite a few of those, we better watch our step. And that's basically where it comes from. And I've been after one for a long time, and the old biddy who had one on a pole in Nigel, she wouldn't sell it to me, Bianca, because it was in part of her husband's estate, and she told me in no uncertain terms to bugger off. So not quite, but almost. And then this one on the factory in Heidelberg, again the same story. It was owned by a company and no one had authority to take it down and sell it to me. It was in a terrible state. If you look at the photographs outside on the collage, you will see what a state it was in. Well, what eventually happened, I had a heads up from a friend of mine who said, Gordon, the Mirage is off the roof of the factory in Heidelberg and I believe it's up for sale. Get in touch with the managing director and see if you can buy it. Well, I was like a rat up a drain pipe. Got straight over there, met the guy, made him an offer he couldn't refuse. He said, great, you can have it, but I want it out of this place by the end of the week. That was quite a project. So I said, sure, I forget his name now, Theo, what made you sell it? Because I've tried for years and you've always said no. And he said, because we've been overtaken or taken over by a Brazilian company and it doesn't quite fit their image. So I said, well, it fits my image, it suits my image. And all these things, to me, are part of our history. To tell you the story of getting it over here, it was a serious project. This was back in May 2019, yes it was. 2019, Bianca, and we had to get it back, as I mentioned a few moments ago. It was a major project because the wheels wouldn't turn and it was a terrible state. I used one of my friends here who runs a trucking company and he went to pick it up for me on the Friday morning. He'd done a recce with me a few days before. He saw the problems. We took the wings off, which was a job in itself, and then it was loaded by crane onto two flatbeds. The wings on one and the rest of the plane on the other. It was a serious, serious project. We had to get a police escort, a police permit, and then get her moving on the Friday afternoon. It took 6 hours to get here from the factory in Heidelberg, the WEG factory. But we managed it. But it cost me 30,000 Rand to get it over. But well worth it. I love it. Money on aviation is not spent unwisely. And I love it. And then I have a friend called Neil Fenton who owns a company called Tech Neil. They can do anything, anything. So Neil came down, he knew about the exercise, he came down. The plane was sitting out there on the grass for a month or so, and it was a terrible state. And then he began to organize what he needed to do to get the plane back into, not running condition, which would be nice, but she's never flown, but to get her in towing condition, because she was in a hangar at the top there. You'll note I refer to planes as she. I always call them females, because you know why, don't you? They will always give you lots and lots of trouble. So like ships, they're always female. So Neil we towed the plane up with great difficulty up to a hangar, a big hangar at the top, and it had to get under these hangars aren't very tall, and if you look at the tail on the plane, she's very tall. They had the plane there from May, June, July, August, September, October, 6 months. And then we had a big, big party after she had been restored. Neil replaced everything, the canopy, the wheels, the undercarriage part of the wings, and the bit on the front's called a pitot. That had broken off, that directs your airspeed. And it was a fabulous job. Well, on the starboard side, just below the canopy is the name of Captain Mark Clulo, 1 Squadron, Billy Boys. Now I don't speak very good Afrikaans, so I don't know what Billy Boys was. But what happened was, at the Second World War, the British couldn't understand or pronounce the Afrikaans, but it sounded very much like Billy Boys. So they were all, their call sign for 1 Squadron was Billy Boys. And Mark was a friend of mine, still is a friend of mine, lovely guy. He spent 10 years in the Air Force, flying the Mirage F1. I think he also flew the F3. Did a lot of hours on these two planes. Lovely guy. Hulo was a pilot and flew probably 1,000 hours with Mirage 1 Squadron. He saw action in Angola, and he did some very, very brave flying. He subsequently left the Air Force, probably now at least 20 years ago. He's 55 now, so 25 years ago. Qualified as a chartered accountant because he's very bright. In the old days in the war, when my father was flying, you just had to be brave. Now you have to be a computer fundi. For guys like Mark, they had to know their way around computers and all the digital stuff which most planes have today. I couldn't fly today because I couldn't understand that lot. But Mark was very, very good, had a great track record, and was decorated for bravery and medals for being in the border war. On the other side of the cockpit, Bianca, there's another dear friend of mine called Arthur Piercy. Now this is a lovely story of bravery. Sorry. I get very emotional. I didn't fight in a war. My generation was the first generation never to go to war. My father went, his father was killed. You know, we didn't have to go. We were very, very lucky we didn't have to go. So Arthur Piercy, when he was a Rhodesian pilot, he came down to fight for the South Africans Air Force, South African Air Force, and he was a great, great warrior. He was flying on a mission back from Angola back in 78 or 87. Might have been 87. But he was attacked by a Cuban MiG-35, and the missile struck his engine and the hydraulics which keep the plane going. Hydraulics control all your wings, your flaps, your hydraulics, everything, hydraulics. And he was losing control. Very tough when you're doing 1,000 miles an hour to lose control. And the plane was sinking all the time. You build up speed and then climb again. Go level for a while, come down again, descend. And he got back to Ondangwa with great skill. And he tried to land. He tried to land without hydraulic, which is not a good idea. Not a good idea at all. Because the hydraulics controls, as I said, your brakes, your ailerons, and your flaps. Okay, the flaps are on the wings. But he managed to put it down, but when he found he landed, he hadn't got any brakes. So the plane wouldn't stop. He went through the net, which you may know they have a net at the end of the runways to stop the planes that lose control. He went through that net, and the plane skidded around the place, and then the parachute, the hydraulic seat rather, not hydraulic seat, the ejector seat, which is that thing in the corner. And the ejector seat went off. It fired off and took off from the plane, but now he's lying in the grass parallel with the runway when the ejector seat goes off. And he's lying there with a broken back, and he's looking at the guns behind him, which are aimed directly at him, and the fire is spreading. So he decides he'd better get out of there pretty damn quickly, which he managed to do. And then of course the fire engines and the ambulances all arrived. He had a broken back, and he's been in a wheelchair ever since that fateful day. Lovely guy, lovely Afrikaans girlfriend who loves him. And another of my heroes, Bianca, because those guys had big cojones, as we say in Spain. 2 years ago, I entertained an old boy in here, gave him a coffee and biscuits, and we chatted and showed him around and one thing or another. Well, he died of COVID about 2 years ago, and he said to his wife, his dying wish on his deathbed was to track down Gordon Dyne at Brakpan Airfield and give him all my models. And all the models, some are on that table waiting to be cleaned, and there's a whole stack of them on the tables out there. A lot of planes. The thought was lovely, and I've got all the models here. I'm going to turn this now into um, cabinets for my models. There's about 150 odd models out there and another 20 or 30 small ones on the kitchen table. So this will be turned into proper cabinets for aeroplanes. I've got to clean them all, that's a hell of a job. But I'll manage it because I love being down here. He's in July to England to see my two grandchildren who I've not seen. One I've not seen, he's a year tomorrow. And the other one I've not seen since they were out here at Christmas after all this COVID nonsense. And then from England I'm going to America, to Chicago, because in July there is the biggest air show in the world called Oshkosh in Northern America near the Great Lakes. And I've been 3 times in the last 20 years. I went 2002, 7 and 9, this is my last hurrah. My legs are shot and I won't be able to walk very far. It's a phenomenal air show. The Air Force are there, the British are there, the French, the Italians, every Tom, Dick and Harry is at this air show. It's a wonderful air show. So we'll be there for 8 or 9 days, then I'm coming back to New York, stay with my daughter, and then after 2 weeks with her, we fly back to London. Like an idiot 3 times when I've almost killed myself, which we tend to do. The temptation to fly low, you're recording?
Yes.
The temptation to fly low, excuse me, is very real. And I fly low over this field. And they always say, don't worry about the height of the elephants, worry about the height of the rabbits. You understand?
Yes.
So we fly very low, a number of us do, we get into all sorts of trouble, and the CAA, which is the Civil Aviation Authority, give me hell. I also do the same with my cars, but then that gives me even more help. So yes, so I have flown like a prat on several occasions. I will go on flying for as long as I can. I don't have a medical anymore, which isn't a problem. I just fly with a nanny. I fly still left seat or front seat with my Chinese baby in there. And I love every second of it. I don't intend stopping flying for a little while yet. I'd like to make 80 if my health holds up. But there will of course come a time when we all have to hang up our headsets. Not a pretty thought, not a good idea, but we have to do it one of these fine days.